Okay, so we live in this uh, hyper-connected world, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like there's this constant battle for our attention online. Narratives clashing, strong opinions everywhere. Sometimes it's really hard to tell what's actual fact and what's just, designed to get a reaction out of us. We're just flooded with information, and trying to sort through all these really strong viewpoints, well, it can be pretty overwhelming. Things escalate so fast online, and that line between, say, fair criticism and outright controversy gets really blurry. So let's try and unpack one of these situations today. We're doing a deep dive into a pretty recent online firestorm. It really cuts through a lot of accusations of misogyny flying around, questions about celebrity image, and some, honestly, tricky ethical questions about online reporting.
Yeah, it's a tangled web.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's messy, but also kind of fascinating to see how information gets shaped and maybe even used as a weapon.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're drawing from quite a detailed online discussion we found, basically, commentators digging into a specific article and the person who wrote it. Our aim here is to pull out the key arguments, the different viewpoints, and they often clash that were presented in that discussion. We want to help you, the listener, kind of navigate these complex claims and the pushback against them. And what's really key here, I think, is that this whole thing isn't just about the specific people involved. It actually touches on bigger questions about, what counts as factual reporting versus just opinion, especially when big names, celebrities, are in the mix. Who gets to control the story? That's kind of the undercurrent.
Okay, got it. So let's dive into the absolute core of this controversy as laid out in that discussion. A really central point they make is this idea that any criticism directed at a woman involved in some kind of legal fight just gets instantly slapped with the misogyny label. The commentators we're looking at, they sound genuinely frustrated by this. They see it as this really broad, almost knee-jerk reaction. It's like, if you even suggest the man in this situation might have a point, boom, misogynist.
Right. And what's interesting is how they see this affecting the conversation. The commentators argue that this kind of constant screaming of misogyny, as they put it, it's happening so much it's actually making the word lose its power, its real meaning. So this tactic, they argue, isn't about genuine critique. They call it rage bait.
Rage debate.
Yeah, basically content that's like specifically engineered to make people angry or outraged. The goal isn't discussion, it's just to drive clicks and engagement. They're saying a serious issue, misogyny, is being kind of exploited for traffic.
And the person who is really at the heart of this particular critique, the one whose writing and actions are dissected in this discussion, we're calling her the author in question, right?
That's right.
So, according to this online discussion, who is she? What's the background here that's fueling all these claims? Well, the discussion gives quite a bit of history on the author in question. They talk a lot about her alleged involvement or commentary during that huge Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. The claim is she first seemed to acknowledge one side was, essentially correct, but then supposedly she flipped her position, and the commentators allege this wasn't just changing her mind. They claim it was specifically for financial gain, that she started deliberately rage-baiting fans of one side, calling them all misogynists.
Yeah.
It's a pretty serious charge, manipulating sentiment for profit.
And they go into her alleged tactics, too. The discussion claims she barely engaged with the actual legal details. Like, she apparently admitted she didn't watch the Depp trial itself.
Really? Didn't watch it?
That's the claim in the discussion. Instead, the picture they paint is that she uses other online figures' names to get attention, to get clicks, and has this whole strategy of generating hate clicks. Basically, deliberately provoking certain online groups to get them angry and drive traffic to her articles. Articles, they suggest, wouldn't get much attention otherwise.
Wow. And it apparently got personal, too. The discussion talks about a conflict escalating.
Oh, yeah.
They say this author wrote a hit piece against one of the commentators because he, quote, exposed her. And this article, they claim, was based on edited audio.
Which he insists wasn't edited at all.
Right, a direct contradiction. And not only that, but the sources for this hit piece were supposedly described by the commentators as literal psychopaths, or the worst of the worst. They basically said the whole thing was laughable, totally lacking credibility.
And if you zoom out a bit, the discussion also tracks her career path. They mentioned she was allegedly fired from a big news organization, NBC News. Apparently her whole department was let go. And now her current role, as they describe it, is writing opinion pieces, guest essays for a very well-known newspaper. The commentators and the source material, they see this as shady. They really question the newspaper's judgment publishing her, given this alleged background and history of, misrepresenting things.
Okay, this is where things get Really interesting and connect to some household names. The discussion shifts focus to Blake Lively.
Mm-hmm.
The commentators straight up assert that Blake Lively is seen as someone who actively courts attention. And they strongly suggest her husband, Ryan Reynolds, is kind of operating in the background, driven by what they call a power trip. It definitely paints a picture of celebrity influence working behind the scenes.
Yeah, and the perspective in this discussion is that there's this specific story about Blake Lively being pushed really hard, even though, in their view, there's evidence that contradicts it. They ask this question, like, why would everybody have to be wrong here? They point to the author in question basically advising people to, quote, believe Blake, don't believe your lying eyes.
Implying ignore any contradictory signs.
Exactly. It suggests this really forceful push for one particular narrative, almost like ignore anything else you see or hear. It's about controlling the story.
And the claims get very specific, pulling in another huge star, Taylor Swift.
Right.
The discussion mentions an affidavit from someone described as closely linked to Taylor Swift. This person allegedly claimed Blake Lively asked Swift to post something specific online with an implied threat or else.
That's a heavy claim.
It is. And the commentators add that this person was later identified as Taylor Swift's father. They do add a note of caution, saying confirmation on that specific detail is still pending for them internally, but still.
Wow. Wow. Or else is intense.
Definitely. And they point to other things they see as signs of friction, like Travis Kelce apparently unfollowing Ryan Reynolds on social media.
Oh, interesting. The social media tea.
Right. The commentators seem convinced it's clear as day that Taylor Swift is upset about something and that her parents are being very protective, feeling she's being kind of pulled into this whole mess against her will. It sounds like a complicated celebrity dynamic.
So this all loops back, doesn't it, to that broader critique of how the misogyny label is being used?
Seems like it.
The commentators argue it's just being thrown around too much by this author, especially as that rage bait tool, and it's losing its meaning. They push back hard against any suggestion that they are just tools defending men accused of sexual violence or SV.
How do they counter that?
They point to their own track record, like their strong stance against figures like Diddy, as proof that they follow facts and evidence, regardless of who is involved. Their whole position, as presented in the discussion, is we are on the side of facts and evidence.
Correct.
And they contrast that sharply with the author in question, who they claim decides on her conclusion first and then finds things to fit it, rather than letting evidence lead.
These claims about tactics and evidence, especially the sourcing, it really brings us to the concerns raised in the discussion about journalistic ethics, right?
Yeah.
Particularly for established media.
Absolutely. The commentators don't hold back their criticism of that prominent newspaper publishing guest essays from the author in question.
Especially given the alleged firing.
Exactly. Given the alleged firing from NBC and her past conduct, which they call shady, they specifically mention previous reporting around Justin Baldoni as an example. They sound genuinely baffled by the newspaper's choice.
They even suggested, didn't they, that they should get an opinion column too?
Yeah, kind of cheekily highlighting what they see as a massive double standard in who gets a platform there.
And then there was that really startling claim about sourcing.
Oh, yeah. That was something else. The claim made in the discussion is that the author in question used an unvetted social media ghost account, supposedly run by a minor, as a primary source for her information.
A ghost account, run by a minor, as a source for reporting.
That's the allegation presented. The commentators expressed just like total disbelief that anyone, let alone someone published in major outlets, could rely on such a questionable, potentially irresponsible source.
I mean, yeah, an unvetted account, possibly a kid, using that as a basis for public claims, it's astonishing if true. How did the discussion connect that back to her credibility overall?
Directly. They emphasized how practices like that would just destroy credibility, and they explicitly linked this alleged behavior to her supposed firing from that major news organization. The implication was clear. These kinds of ethical lapses, this kind of shoddy sourcing, that's what leads to losing your job in serious journalism. It's presented as a real cautionary tale.
Okay, so moving beyond the author herself, what about the bigger picture? The commentators frame this as something larger, right? A kind of battle.
They absolutely do. They state pretty clearly that they see themselves in a battle with billionaires.
Billionaires.
Specifically naming Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. They allege that the couple is using their wealth and influence to try and intimidate content creators like them.
How so? What examples do they give?
They mention things like subpoenas being issued and also claim the couple or people associated with them, tip off tabloids like TMZ to plant stories or put pressure on critics. It's portrayed as a serious power play, using resources to silence dissent.
That sounds intense. So how are the commentators responding? Are they backing down?
Quite the opposite, based on the discussion. They sound completely resolute, they state very clearly they won't be intimidated, and are actively fighting back against what they call harassment. They even mention specific plans like working on a documentary to, quote, expose all this, and they're openly asking for donations to build up their legal war chest, as they put it. They definitely see it as a David and Goliath fight for transparency.
And what about their take on the couple's public image itself? Reynolds and Lively.
Yeah, they offer a pretty sharp critique there, too. They suggest the couple is constantly looking for applause, always seeking credit for charity work, calling it a sham that, quote, nobody's buying.
Ouch.
Their take is basically that the harder the celebrities try to fight back against criticism or control the narrative, the worse it actually makes them look to the public. Like, it backfires.
So bringing this all together,
Hmm.
this deep dive really covered a lot of ground. We've traced the arguments from this online discussion, exploring that tension between these really strong online narratives, the serious claims of bias and manipulation, and just the raw power dynamics you see in celebrity discourse.
Yeah.
It really highlights how these online battles play out and how information can be, well, defended by some and seen as weaponized by others.
It absolutely does. And it leaves us with a pretty critical question for you, the listener, to think about. In this online world that's so polarized, where money and influence and, let's face it, very carefully crafted stories are always in play, how do you tell the difference? How do you separate credible information from stuff that's just trying to manipulate you? How do we all, as people taking in this information constantly, how do we critically look at claims? Especially the ones that come wrapped in, moral outrage or strong emotional language. How do we make sure we're not just taking the bait in these online fights over truth and perception? It's a constant challenge, isn't it? To look past the noise and figure out what's really going on